you so much for being here live. I know it means a lot to me when y'all can show up live and we can ask questions and have a conversation. I know you guys are taking time out of your day to be here, and I'm just going to jump right into it, and I'll get more into like my introduction. I have a couple slides in here to introduce myself a little bit more, in case you don't know who I am. So 1 second, I'll pull up my slides. All right, so you're part of the awesome community 52 Hikes Challenge. And I'm here to present to you a little bit about backpacking. And my presentation today is about the 3 biggest mistakes hikers make as they transition into multi-night backpacking. So the reason why I want to talk to you about this topic, so that I can teach you a few steps and like how you could potentially avoid these mistakes, and just to have like the awareness as you're making that transition from your daily hikes, your day hikes, the solo hikes or not solo hikes, into something that's multi-night, overnight, and a little bit more serious potentially. Because a lot of people, that's naturally the next step that they want to go into. So I'm really curious in the chat to know who here is new to backpacking, or like what your experience is with backpacking. You can just type in, yeah, you're new or you've been on one. Tressa says, I am new, totally new, never done it. Do you guys have interest in backpacking too? I'm assuming you do, since you're at this presentation. JC said, I've done many backpacks in the Rockies. Great. Yes, yes, awesome. Okay, you're in the right place. Jennifer said only one overnight trip last year. Totally fine. So today's biggest takeaway is I just want to tell you that you can be both a newbie and you can be a safe, confident, and self-sufficient outdoor backpacker. And in case you want to get to know who I am, my name is Allison. I'm actually a full-time outdoor educator, and I'm also a certified life coach. And the main thing that my team and I do is we have a program called the Backpacking Badass Program that teaches women how to become safe, confident, and self-sufficient. And we focus on, women and underrepresented genders, because we feel like there isn't as much coaching specifically geared towards us, our fears, our anxieties, the things that we want to learn, and create like a really safe space and community around that. So that's what I do full time. And I have a really small team of 3 other women that work with me as well. So I started my business to teach others, again, especially women, how to be safe so that you know how to make smart decisions on the trail and you don't get yourself into a pickle, right? So that you know how to be confident so that you can stay calm when things don't go according to plan, because that happens a lot in the backcountry, and to know how to harness your courage when fear pops up, whether that's pre-trail, on trail, post-trail, like it can happen at any moment. And also to be self-sufficient so that you're not waiting around on others to have an amazing, wild, and thrilling, adventurous kind of life, right? So no matter where you live, how old you are, what your background is, or like how freaked out or fearful you might feel about all of the things right now, I want you to know that that is a place that you can totally get to. So why listen to me? I've been backpacking, hiking, mountaineering, climbing, adventuring for over 11 years now. I've also been coaching full-time in this business for over 6 years now, and I've coached over 1,500 women in becoming self-sufficient backpackers. I'm also WFR certified, that's Wilderness First Responder. I also run the popular outdoor blog called Dreams of Alpine. And I know my shit, y'all, and I care a whole lot about you and my clients and getting more women on the trail. So, but more importantly, and this is the point I really want to emphasize here, listen to me, because I'm a very normal person just like you, okay? So I'm not this exception or unicorn or somebody who grew up with the mountains in her backyard, right? I didn't grow up outdoorsy. I was scared of all the things when I started out, and I didn't get started until like my late 20s. So listen to me, because if I can do it, so can you. Like, you don't have to have a background or have been growing up your whole life with people that brought you up this way. You might have discovered this passion and desire to get outdoors, be more adventurous, be more courageous later in life, and that's totally awesome. So let's jump into the 3 mistakes that hikers make as they transition into multi-night backpacking. So mistake number 1 is not understanding what their body is capable of. So there are similarities between hiking and backpacking, as you know, but a big difference is the toll that backpacking takes on your body compared to most day hikes. So obviously, this, I'm sure you guys have thought about this, but when you're day hiking, you're carrying like 5 to 10 pound packs. And when you're backpacking, ideally, you're carrying 25 to 35 pound packs, especially for lower day trips. We can talk a little bit more about like some of the nuances of that. But if you're just starting out, you're borrowing gear, you're being a little bit scrappy, which many of us do as beginners, then you might even have a little bit heavier of a pack, right? You also need a strong understanding of how mileage and elevation gain go hand in hand. And you might, hopefully, like with your one beautiful thing about the 52 hikes challenge is you guys are getting out there, like, I think, once a week or, 52 end of the year. You're getting that good understanding of like, okay, this hike was this many miles and this was this elevation gain. That is the first step, starting to have that awareness of like, oh, this hike felt easy, this hike felt difficult. And I want you to really start paying attention to on your hikes, like thinking about the stats, like what was my pace like on this type of mileage and this type of incline and this type of elevation gain, because that will be really helpful as you transition into backpacking to kind of know my day one feels similar to this day hike that I have done before. And you can kind of get a gauge of like what that experience might be like for you backpacking. But also multi-night backpacking trips take a stronger layer of mental training and grit as well, because, with a day hike, you're like, well, like I'm just going to go out and come back to my car, go home. Like you're not thinking about all the things. With a backpacking trip, it can be more committing, right? You're thinking, I need to have stamina to keep going the next day. And what if I get out there 2 days in and I really need to like turn around? There's all these things that you're going to be considering more of when you're backpacking versus your day hiking. So the beautiful thing is training, like we talked about just a few minutes ago, gives us the confidence for these big goals. So I think combining your goals and aspirations to go backpacking goes really well with a goal like 52 Hikes Challenge. Not only are you training your body, but you're training your physical, mental grit, like around fears that you might be having, different mileage, different elevation gains, just getting a better understanding overall on like your capacity, what you can push yourself to, all of those things. So training is crucial, but I personally think it's fun too. So plan your day hikes to learn about your capacity. And I talked a little bit about this in the slide before. I always get ahead of myself. I teach things that I forget that I have on slides, but I'm going to say it again. So as you're doing your day hikes in the 52 Hikes Challenge, this is what I would like you to pay attention to, especially if you want to go backpacking this year or like in the future. Pay attention to your recovery. How sore are you afterwards? Pay attention to your pace. So if you think about it, like when I'm on flat trails, I usually hike 2 miles per hour, or when I'm on an incline, I'm hiking maybe 1.2 or 1.5. Like it doesn't matter what other people are doing. I just want you to know what you're doing so that you can have a better understanding. Like when you're planning a backpacking trip, oh, this day might be a 6 to 8 hour day of hiking for me to my campsite. It's just nice to have these data points and relate them back to your day hikes. You're going to get a better idea of your capacity. Also pay attention to your energy. Should you test out different foods to fuel with, like different electrolytes? Like what does your body work well on and fueling itself for big miles and elevation gain? Blisters, are you getting them on your day hikes? If we are, like, let's figure out how we cannot get them. And that way we can address the problem before we're doing multi-night adventures, right? If you're getting hot spots, pay attention to where those might be, because then when you go on those multi-night trips, you can prep those areas in advance so that hopefully you prevent them from happening. Train with weight. So as you're doing day hikes, if you have aspirations to go backpacking, I always encourage my clients to start making their packs heavier so that you can start also getting that experience of like what the fatigue feels like when you're carrying a heavy pack. And also it can be really great because you can sometimes with new packs loaded up, you might have little places that are rubbing or pinch points or like pressure points that you want to work out before you go on a like more committing multi-night adventure. always pack the essentials, even on your day hike, treat it seriously. And then I think that's just like a note um, that I meant to put there. I should put that at the bottom. So also pay attention to like what mind drama is coming up for you. And mind drama is a word I use with my clients all the time, but it's basically like that panic voice, that fear voice, that self-doubt voice. Like, what does it sound like in your brain? And it's not even during the hike, even like sometimes I find my clients and myself, we freak out the most right before something is going down. Like before a trip, we had something big planned. It's like, in the beginning, you're very excited. You set a goal to go do something. And it's almost like a couple days before, the week before, you start thinking of all the reasons it's a horrible idea and like why you're not ready. Pay attention to those thoughts because our brain really like just doesn't like us doing things that are out of its comfort zone. And so that's a really normal human reaction. And it doesn't mean that you can't go do it. I just want you to start paying attention to what's coming up for you because it's going to be twofold with backpacking. Mistake number 2, packing more gear than is needed. So I know this might sound obvious, but it is a classic beginner mistake. And I totally understand why, and I can relate to this. And I'm going to show you a picture. So meet Allison on her very first backpacking trip in 2013. So I got invited. I think I was like an engineer back then, and I had just moved from Texas to California. And I was like sitting at a water cooler at my office, and I heard these people talking about this place called Half Dome. And I didn't know what that was. I knew what Yosemite was, but I had never heard of Half Dome at the time, which is this, if you don't know it, that's totally fine too, because I have not known it before. But it's this beautiful epic hike in Yosemite National Park. Definitely worth putting on your bucket list if you hadn't heard of it or you've never done it before. Anyways, I was like, oh, what is that? And they were telling me about it. And then one person was like, we have an extra permit. Do you want to go? And I personally, at this point in my life, had gone through a recent divorce and I had entered my personal year. I was calling it kind of like my year of yes, where I was just trying to do things different than I had done and get myself out of my comfort zone, stop telling myself I was scared of everything, stop telling myself I was too shy, and just really get uncomfortable. It was like a year of discomfort, and I was just doing things that made me uncomfortable. So I said yes to this adventure. And I did not know what I was doing, but I definitely overpacked. I think my friend sent me like a list of things that he usually went, but I found out later like he hadn't even been on that many trips. So we were kind of really getting scrappy here. And my pack ended up being 45 pounds, which is not ideal, especially for a 1 to 3 night trip. It was very, very heavy. So I usually like to recommend to my clients, like eventually for like a 1 to 3 night trip, it would be great and really comfortable for your body to get that more in the 25 to 35 pound weight. So that's all in. You can get really nerdy with talking pack weights if you want to, but I choose to just be like very holistic when I talk about it. So that includes food and water. But some of the ultralight backpacker community, they'll talk about like your base weight and like your food weight and your water weight. And that you'll learn that with time. So it was funny because this trip with a 45-pound pack, it took me 8 hours to get from the trailhead to our first camp, which was Little Yosemite Valley, which is before you go up to Half Dome. And I'm telling you that number because I've gone back and done this trail a few times because I used to live in California for a while. And it took me 2 hours, you know, like after I got into hiking and into backpacking and became more trained and like optimized my gear. It's just an interesting thing to note. And I definitely think the pack weight played a little bit into that, especially in the beginning, because it was very heavy. It was a lot of elevation gain. There was a lot of factors that went into it, but that's a classic mistake that many of us make, including me, when we just start out. So compare this to now. This is kind of what my pack weight tends to be like for trips. This was for the John Muir Trail. My husband and I did this in 2020. And at most, each section, we were loaded up with 6 days of food. And there's lots of water on the trail. So at most, we were carrying about 2 liters of water at a time. So my pack And I was sharing some stuff with my husband. So we did have some shared gear. But I even think solo, I probably could have gotten it similar, but it was about 30 pounds. So compare that to my 45-pound pack for like 2 nights, this was 6 days. Food is where a lot of your weight will be. That's kind of where things start to get really heavy, is when you have longer trips, or if you need to carry lots of water, that can make your pack weight really heavy too. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I also want to say, we don't start out with like the most optimized gear. I really think it's more important to be a little scrappy in the beginning, because you're learning what you like, what you want to use, what you want to upgrade to eventually. Like, you're not going to have the best gear when you just start and the most light gear, and you're still figuring out what works best for you. So why is this hard? One of the hardest things I think about getting into backpacking is that there definitely feels like an overwhelming amount of advice on the topic. Like, especially now, I feel like I can't open up I know I might like look pretty young, but I mean, I didn't grow up with like the TikToks and Instagram. TikTok freaks me out. I think we have one because we have somebody on my team who posts stuff there. I can't open the app, but now you open it, everyone has advice on the gear that you should be buying, right? It's everywhere. Like, this thing is great. There's, all the brands are showing all their new stuff. It's just overwhelming sometimes. Like, what's going to work? What's the best thing? I'm definitely like, find something really quality and like stick with it for a long time. A lot of my gear that you saw on this last slide, I still have today. So like, I've been using it for over 7 years. These poles, I think I bought in 2014. We still use these poles. So you get good gear, it will last you a long time. But it is overwhelming at first. And everyone has different opinions, even me. Like, you will have something that you love that wouldn't be for me, and I would have something that I love that won't be for you. And that's totally fine. So I like to teach my students, basic gear principles, which include like, what are those essential safety gear pieces? And I teach a concept like, we want to have redundancy in our most essential safety systems. I'm going to give you an example of that on the next slide. So what that means. But what is our essential safety gear? What are our must-haves versus nice-to-haves? What can we use now and what can we upgrade to later? Like, we might have a rain jacket or something suitable enough from snowboarding or something that you've done in the past. And maybe that's not like the lightest piece of rain gear ever, but that's totally going to work just fine. So that's just like an example. What multi-purpose gear do you have? And then reducing the option overwhelm, because at the end of the day, it's just like, what's going to get me out on the trail so I can start getting experiences and like improving my skills and all of those things. So examples of redundancy and our safety systems. A good example of that is like with water. So a lot of people, including myself, we like to use like, I call them mechanical, but mechanical is not a holistic term for all the water filters. Like, this filter is actually a fiber filter, but I'm saying mechanical because there's pieces, right? So a lot of us like to use these filters that have these pieces that can break. And that's important to note because water is one of our most essential safety items in the outdoors, and especially having clean water. You do not want to get sick. You should always filter your water. I have had friends in my past that didn't think they always needed to filter mountain water and then ended up with like really severe cases of Giardia. So always filter your water, unless it were like last case, like ditch scenario to stay alive or something. And redundancy here is like, because I know that my fiber filter, my mechanical filter can break, it can get clogged. I could lose a piece. There's all kinds of things that could happen to this. Like, somebody could step on it, crush it. I don't know. Something could happen to it and it could break. I like to always bring a double, especially if I'm solo. So I always pack Aqua Mira or like iodine tabs as my backup. And that's like a more chemical solution to water, purifying filtration. So I would always have two, especially if I'm solo. If I'm in a group, then I'm just making sure everybody at least has one of their own. Like maybe my husband will carry the Aquamira and I'll carry the Catadine Be Free. And then like if we got separated somehow, we at least both have something. Ideally, we're not getting separated, but it's also, that's a little bit of redundancy in our group too. Like if he were just relying on me to have the filter, but then I don't know, husband gets lost, I lose him somewhere. And then I'd be like, well, that sucks for him because he doesn't have the water filter. So these are just things to think about. And that's just an example of creating some redundancy in our most essential safety items. Pack only the essentials. So, I mean, the best place to start is having a good packing checklist. This is ours at She Dreams of Alpine. So if you want to print it out, you can grab that at our website at shedreamsofalpine.com/checklist. It's going to tell you exactly what to bring. And there's a visual checklist as well, kind of like you can relate it back to the list checklist. But I literally have this thing printed out and in my gear, I know it's not a gear room, it's like a gear corner of the room. So I have it in that corner because I forget stuff. Like I'll be packing and I'll be like, I think I got everything. And I'll pull my list out and I'll be going through it. And I'm like, I forgot chapstick and I forgot like sunglasses or something, you know? So it's really important to have a list to make sure you're not forgetting things and to help you not overpack. So keep this in mind, know your pack weight. One thing I always do is like weigh my bag before I leave for a trip. And at least, you know, and don't overly judge yourself. If you have an easier backpacking trip, you can have a little bit heavier pack and it's going to be less consequence. But, and this is something we encourage our students to do too, is do shakedown trips, like do an easier, like low commitment trip when you're starting out. Feel what like lots of pack weight and miles feel like carrying your backpack out into the wilderness. And that way you can kind of start to relate like, oh, I've packed a 40-pound bag and this is how bad it felt, or it felt fine. Like, you know, maybe I want to optimize here. You can have those conversations with yourself. Be wary of what advice you're taking for what you need or don't need on the trail. And also don't let ultralight backpackers make you feel like you have to buy the super ultralight gear before you get started. In my opinion, that's not true at all. Also, like I wouldn't even consider myself an ultralight backpacker. I know that there's like technical terms for all this. I'm just kind of like optimized for me, and I have my creature comforts. So I don't go full ultralight where I'm like chopping off the end of a toothbrush sort of thing, you know, but I kind of sit there in the middle. And yeah, you can start backpacking and take your time to build your perfect kit. That's also something I really like to remind people about. And you can also rent gear, which is super mind-blowing because that didn't used to be like a huge option back in the day. But now there's so many more companies that rent gear. I think even REI rents gear now. So if you're like, I know exactly what I want, or I don't know exactly what I want, and you want to get started on working on your skills, renting gear is a really nice option to like help you start dabbling, getting some experience, or waiting to buy the thing that you really want while you're in the meantime. So my hot take, though, from all of this, as we transitioned into the third mistake, is it's more important to learn the safety skills that you need on the trail than to have fancy gear. Because a lot of my students, another mistake that they made is they get into like, I mean, gears, it's fun to shop for gear, don't get me wrong, but like gear is a means to an end. And ultimately, we're trying to get out on the trail, we're trying to be safe, we're trying to have really great experiences out there. And you can do that with a lot of different pieces of gear, but if you don't have the skills, like you can have all this gear sitting in your house and never doing anything with it. And that's like an example from one of my students, Sherry. I think she said when she had joined our program, she's been there for a while. And I think she's actually one of the ambassadors with the over 50 ambassadors at the 52 Hikes Challenge, if I remember correctly. I might be saying ambassador wrong. I don't know what you guys call it, but when she joined our program, I think it was like 2020, she told me she had been collecting gear for like a couple of years. And just kind of like was in that overwhelmed stage of like so much advice, so many people saying you need different things and like not actually going that next step, right? Okay, which leads me into mistake number 3, relying on others for their safety. So I'm really passionate about this. If you stick around, hang around my world or my Instagram, like this is the thing I talk about the most. The biggest mistake that I personally think hikers make as they transition into multi-night backpacking is not taking ownership of their own personal safety on the trail and instead relying on quote unquote more experienced people, right? So the key to any repeatable backpacking success is to learn to become self-sufficient and competent in your own skills. So you might be thinking to yourself, like, why is being self-sufficient so important for me to strive towards? Can't I just tag along? So I'm going to tell you why you should strive to be self-sufficient. First of all, when you're self-sufficient, you're taking charge of your future. So whether you have somebody to go with on trips or not, you're confident enough to lead trips or go solo. And this was a huge one for me. When I had gone, I told you guys about that first trip. And I thought these people were going to be my backpacking people. But I found out later that they just wanted to do Half Dome. Like it was a bucket list California tick list item for them. And they weren't that interested in backpacking. I wanted to do more backpacking and I couldn't find anybody else to go with. So that's kind of what led me in my personal journey to become like, okay, how do I learn all the things? How do I become safe? How do I know how to do this stuff for myself so I can lead my own trips? That's kind of what brought me into that journey. But then I was able to like, in California, a lot of things are permitted. I know all of y'all are from all around the world, but a lot of things are permitted. So I would get a lot of permits in January. And what was so nice to know is that I would get permits for like maybe 3 or 4 people, but I was like, if nobody can go, I can still go on my own. Like it was just nice to know that I had that confidence in myself. According to Backpacker Magazine, so they said backpackers who describe themselves as leaders are 3 times as likely to have taken more than 4 backpacking trips in the past year versus non-leaders are 3 times as likely to have gone on 0 trips. So even if you're like, I never want to go solo, still start to see yourself as a leader. And I'm going to talk about different like leadership personas in a second. But like, I think it's super important to see yourself as a strong contributor and a leader in any backpacking trip that you're going on. So that's why I believe as soon as you can, you should turn your desire to go backpacking into a desire to be self-sufficient and lead your own trips eventually. So power moves, when you step into that leadership role, like you stop waiting on others for the invite and you are able to like start owning your adventures and owning that future, right? You're not waiting around for other people to invite you along. And that shift is super powerful. So reason number 2 is you own your own safety. This is also super important, right? You'll always have your own back, even if things go wrong or even if you got separated from your group. So I think that there is a little bit of a false sense of security in groups. Obviously, there is some safety component in being in groups as well, but then there's also a false sense of security. You could get separated from your group. You could wind up being with a group that is actually not that competent, like I did with my Half Dome trip. I was thinking when I joined that group, like they had all this knowledge, but we were talking and talking, and I got to know like they didn't actually know that much about backpacking or what we should be doing in certain scenarios. Like none of them had GPS maps loaded or anything. Like they didn't really know. They were just there. So that was interesting. You could be with a group that makes poor decisions or panics. Like sometimes that happens as well. Or you could need to leave your group and get help. There could be some situation where, especially if you're in like a group of 2, for example, that you might need to go off and get help for some reason. Things become unsafe when you don't know what you're doing at all. You didn't know how to make a trip plan or understand how to read a trip plan, or nobody in your group made a trip plan. And you also didn't create a safety plan, or you haven't communicated some sort of safety communication plan with others on the outside. You make poor judgment calls. If you prioritize summits over safety, hopefully that makes sense to you. Like you've heard of the people who want to go hike a peak and then bad weather is rolling in, but they have that summit fever and they are not willing to make the call to turn around when that's the right choice. And a good leader, somebody who has their own back that's really putting safety first, will be like, it's just the better decision to turn around right now. You let fear win out over calm decision making. That can also be unsafe. Like, so part of becoming self-sufficient and confident in yourself is learning how, like, fear is inevitable. Like, we're human, we get scared, but like learning how do we calm ourselves in the midst of fear so that we can make smart decisions and get ourselves out of tough situations that sometimes arise when we're out in the middle of the backcountry. So knowing you have your own back, in my opinion, makes you feel courageous. So even if you never want to go solo, I'm just going to say this again. Like, I want you to be able to, if you got lost or disconnected from your group while you're backpacking, I want you to feel like you would be confident in your ability to stay safe and make a plan. And if you needed to leave your group in an emergency situation, you would feel comfortable doing so. I would want you to know how to calm yourself down when you experience fear in the backcountry and create a plan in emergency situations. And also, like, I think it's super important. Every single person who's backpacking should understand what a trip plan and a safety plan is, what goes into it, what should be in one. Even if you're not making it, like if the person who's calling themselves the leader of your backpacking trip, they're making one and sharing it with you. Like, that should be something you get a good understanding of before any trip. So I always tell my students, like, I want them to feel solo confident, even if they never go solo backpacking. Because some people don't want to go solo backpacking, and I don't think anybody should ever feel pressured to do so. A lot of my clients do eventually want to go solo backpacking. That's like a goal of theirs. But if you don't, that's totally fine. But at least try to get yourself to that place where you're like, if shit hit the fan, I could. Like, I can do it. And a lot of times with your hikes, I'm sure some of y'all are going out there doing solo hikes because it's hard sometimes to find people to go with. And these skills, the skills that you learn in being safe, confident, and self-sufficient in backpacking will translate to all the things you're doing day hiking as well. And yeah, I mean, if you can't tell by now, my unpopular opinion is most people will tell you it's not safe for women to be alone in the outdoors. And I'm the coach that will teach you how you can make your dream of feeling confident and being solo or leading groups safer, and how to make your own safety calls from a place of empowerment and not fear. So I just really can't get behind when people tell me not to do something just because I'm a woman. Like, I can't get behind that messaging. And so I really like to empower people to like make that choice for themselves, not based on like the fear other people are projecting on us. So we make those places, like sometimes we do make the call, like even me, myself, I make a safety call to be like, I'm not going to do this one alone. Like, it's just a little bit, I'm personally calling this one unsafe for me, but my unsafe, my barometer for that might be different than other people's, like your risk assessment of something or your comfort with risk. So yeah. Okay. And reason number 3, reason to be self-sufficient, is you create your community. So you might not think about this one that much, but leadership energy attracts the community that you're craving. You guys are in a great space because you're already in a community that people are wanting to do this. So that's really great. Like, sometimes it can be really lonely when you're just getting started a new hobby or doing a new thing. And like your friends and family are like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I don't understand why you want to do this all the time. But one of the things that I found is when I became self-sufficient, people like kind of just started asking if I would bring them along, and they would like want to join trips. It's just when people see you pursuing the thing that's lighting you up and taking ownership of it, they're going to naturally be attracted to that kind of energy. And also, other people that are doing similar things are going to be like, hey, I like, you're cool. You're doing things safely. Like, you also, like, I'm not going to have to baby you in this trip. Like, you have your own back. They're going to want to invite you along on things. So you start to create a community when you step into this persona as well. which I think I pretty much, oh, this is a little different, but it's the secret to unlocking a life filled with amazing adventures. It basically gives you options. When you become self-sufficient, I think it unlocks a lot more opportunities and doors for you instead of feeling like really, waiting around for somebody more experienced to take you under their wing. So when I stopped waiting around on others, I became that friend I wish that existed. I learned what I needed to be safe. I got the permits. I planned the trips. I did the work, right? And in doing so, I ended up creating the community that I was like really wanting to have, the outdoorsy community, the adventurous community. And I started living the adventurous life that I wanted to be living. So a little bit about the self-sufficient personas, because I just think it's nice to kind of think about what does it look like to be a self-sufficient backpacker? It's not just a solo backpacker, right? So there's 3 different kind of personas you're going to jump between. And I jump between all of these all the time, right? The first one is the strong group contributor, right? This would be a scenario where maybe you have a friend that is competent in backpacking and is experienced, and they invite you along, but you're not like, you're there, you're part of it, you're doing your work, you're learning, maybe you're learning a little bit from him, but you're like also taking care of your stuff, you're contributing to the group, right? The other persona is the fierce adventurous leader. So this would be like if you were the one spearheading the trip, like you get your friends together, you're like, this is what we're doing. You're putting the trip plans together. You're making sure everyone feels prepared. You're creating the safety plans. You're communicating all those things. And then the third one would be that solo backpacking badass. So you're going to jump between these 3 as you grow into a self-sufficient backpacker. And these are just examples from my students of them jumping in between. One of my favorite ones, though, is this one from Gilly, one of my students. She said, I went backpacking with a group of seasoned hikers this weekend, and it felt wonderful to be completely self-sufficient and prepared. No one would have known it was only my 3rd time out. So it's like super empowering for yourself too, when you go with other people to know like I'm a strong like contributor in this group. Like I'm happy to be here. They're happy to have me here. All of those things. Now, when you're starting out, there is going to be like a little bit of a learning curve. And I don't want you to beat yourself up if there's still like, you're still learning, you're still figuring out. There's definitely going to be that phase. But the more you practice and learn these skill sets, like the more prepared you'll be and confident you'll be in that skill set. So, side benefit, learning the skill set of being a leader and being self-sufficient can have a ripple effect to how you show up in the rest of your life. And hopefully I'm kind of an example of that. I used to be an engineer. I was an engineer for 7 years. And yeah, this eventually led me to quitting my job in 2019 and building this business that I have now. A lot of other things, which I don't think I have a slide super going into that, but backpacking changed my life is essentially kind of the short story here, because it introduced myself to a side of me that I didn't know existed before backpacking. I didn't really identify as being courageous. I didn't identify as being adventurous. And the skills and the lessons that I learned from the mountains and being outdoors really translated into just kind of like being a little bit more passionate with what I pursued in my life and having more resilience and tenacity to go after it, right? Because the mountains kind of like teach you these things. And that's one of my favorite part about backpacking. And at some point, like what I always like to think is super interesting is where is that desire to go backpacking coming from? And like pay attention to your desire and pay attention to your curiosity and like trust it. And if you have the desire to go backpacking, I want you to lean into it because it is going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be feeling overwhelming. And that is like, that change that I went through, learning how to navigate discomfort, learning how to navigate fear, all of these things, this will benefit you in every part of your life outside of backpacking. So all of our power comes from our ability to make decisions. It's the waiting and living in the land of maybe that has no power. So if you want new results in your life, you got to start making new decisions. So my challenge is decide to become her today. Like if you were like, I'm going to come to this, I'm just going to come to this presentation, check it out. I kind of maybe want to go backpacking. I just want you to be like, okay, like I'm going to give it a real shot. you don't have to do it next weekend, but like put it out on the calendar. I always tell my students when they join, our program, like make it tangible, like get a permit to something or tell somebody you're going to go do it on this date and just start making the steps towards that. And even if something goes wrong and you don't end up going on that trip, I think like the person that you will become in pursuit of trying to make it happen will get you so much closer, or get you so much closer to being that person who actually does it than if you hadn't made that commitment and that decision to like go all in on it. So yeah, that's my challenge. I'm forgetting how many slides I have here. Hold on. 52 out of 57. I have more. Okay, so I think I said this at the beginning, but you can be new to backpacking and prepared for its challenges and risks without having to rely on a group of experienced backpackers by your side. You've just got to do a little bit of upfront prep and learning, right? If you're new to the things, there are new things you have to learn. If you want help with all the pieces, and I know you have a great community in the 52 Hikes Challenge, but if you enjoyed today's presentation, I do teach this. So you're welcome to come check me out on Instagram, say hi. I'm at Dreams of Alpine. We also have our program you can learn more about. I teach it in like a 5-step framework sort of situation, but essentially simplified. It's like this. You have your goal and you have your actual trip. And everything that we do in between is getting you ready and prepared and feeling self-sufficient to make that a reality. And then this becomes a repeatable cycle in your life. So like, maybe a lot of my clients, their first year, it's like one trip. But then like the next year, it ends up being like 3 trips. And then the next year, it's like their lifestyle. Like, it's just really interesting to watch the compounding effects of like how working on this one small goal can eventually like transform the way you see yourself, the way you show up to your life, all of things. But yeah, so I'm happy to continue working with you on your backpacking goals. If you want to learn more, you can check out our wait list. We open this up periodically throughout the year. Also, I added this slide because this is something we actually only do once a year. It's a little different than what I normally do. We just opened this up last year for the first time. It's called the Adventurous Reinvention Experience. And it kind of combines life coaching has been a really big part of my transformation as well. When I started a business, all the mind drama that came with that, and like learning to overcome a lot of discomfort. And I had to get a coach. And that really transformed like how I navigate emotions, how I navigate change, how I reinvent myself. And so I got certified because that was really impactful to me. And so I've been trying to look for a way to integrate that work even more with our adventures and backpacking and all the things. So last year we created the Adventurous Reinvention Experience. It's a 4-month coaching container. It's definitely a more intimate thing. We only have 24 spots and we do 2 trips, 2 in-person trips. So it's like all summer we coach together. We work on like one piece of your life that you're really interested in exploring and potentially reinventing. Obviously, you can do what you want. You don't have to take any action, but I like guide you through this experience of what that would look like and how do you get to know yourself better and like what you want to create. So yeah, that is actually, we're enrolling in that now. Right now we have it only open to students because we always give our clients first dibs on in-person things. But on April 10th, we open it to the wait list. So if that's something you're interested in, the wait list for that is shedreamsofalpine.com/airy. And again, that opens on April 10th. And I think, okay, I was going to say, I'm happy to take questions if y'all had any. We have time for questions, right, Tiffany?
Absolutely. We definitely have some time. So
Cool.
if anybody has any.
I haven't been paying attention to the chat because I'm a really horrible multitasker.
I didn't
I
I
will
didn't
get so sidetracked if I pay attention to the chat. But if you have questions, you can either like, I'm really
There's
comfortable
nothing
with.
in the chat that you're missing. So
Okay. If you want to unmute yourself or you want to type in a chat, whatever you're more comfortable with, I can go either way. Yeah, go ahead. Is it JC or Jackie?
It's Jackie. Yes.
Okay.
Hi. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I love the thoughts of it. I've done backpacking, but just seeing the connection and great reminders. But you brought up something that I think is really fascinating, and that is the idea of creating a community, like when you started to do this, because
Yes.
I'm at a stage of my life where I never thought I would be. I'm almost 60 and I can't find people to hike with. I mean, I found the
Yeah.
52 hike challenge during COVID because I needed to do something and um but you brought out that idea that you can
Mhm.
manifest that community. I don't
Yes.
know if you have any other insights about creating that
Totally.
or anybody else in the group finds that. It's like I've gone into this new time in my world and everybody's shocked at what I do and high
Yes.
altitude hiking. I've been
But
around
I
the world.
promise you, there are women like just like you that want to
Really?
find you and be your friend.
Well,
Yes.
and there's no
Because
men to
I have
hike,
so many in my
no
community that are like,
60-year-old men.
I'm in my 60s and I'm looking for a community of women. I know they exist. So the first thing I want to say here is because I talk about this with people a lot, right? And I also have found myself in this position. My husband and I, when I started this job, we quit and moved into a van. We did the whole van life thing for a few years. So we were moving around a lot. And then 2 years ago, we moved to Colorado Springs, and neither of us had friends here. So I kind of found myself in a place again where I was like, I have to create community again. What's that like? It's been a while. Like I got a little rusty, right? Um, the biggest thing is I think if you are really like, this is the thing you want to focus on, is you set the intention, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
is my goals to make community, right? And then you got to be willing to like face, you got to be willing to be rejected, number one,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to go meet friends, you're going to meet up with people. Sometimes it's going to be a good fit, feel great, be really fun. Maybe you go on a hike with them again or do something again with somebody. Maybe it's not a good fit and it's awkward. And like, you're just like, I don't even know how to navigate this relationship. And you just got to start looking for different places. And it sounds like you're already doing this. You're in the 52 hikes
Yeah.
challenge and like start brainstorming. A lot of times we want to tell ourselves, but I don't know how. And I always think like one of the things my coach taught me is when my brain tells me that, but what if you did? What if you did know how? And then like journal on that a little bit and just try to brainstorm as many ways with where would I find my people if I did know where to find them? Where would they be? Like where might they be hanging out? And
Yeah.
then you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting because I sort of did some of the things that were in your, and some people are saying they're in the same boat. And I also had a meltdown before I went to Kilimanjaro, just like your head game that you talked about. I was so surprised. That's
Yes.
exactly what happened.
I
And
call
then
it
after I did that, nobody would hike with me because they all thought I was badass. And then
oh
but
yeah.
then I just did it because I needed to do something. And
Yeah.
then I did Everest, I did other ones, and then nobody will hike with me now. And then and all I just love the challenge. And so but I just went and did it. But everyone here, like I'm sure we've all got similar things about this, right?
Yeah. No, totally. I call that pre-trip resistance, by the way, which happens to me
Pre-trip
literally
resistance. Okay.
every single time. I always get it. I just think I'm high. I just have naturally high anxiety.
Yeah.
So this is something I've learned about my human experience and that I always experience anxiety before a trip. And so when it happens, I'm not shocked by it. I'm just like, oh, there it is. Hi. Hello, anxiety. Welcome. We're going backpacking this weekend, or we're going on a solo trip.
Yeah.
Like,
But then the
let's do this.
naysayers say, I told you, you shouldn't do this. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm like, you have a voice, but I'm controlling the wheel. Like, you're
Okay.
there. I think like when we resist it, that's when it's like, oh, I shouldn't be anxious or I shouldn't be scared. We start shoulding all over ourselves. That's when we make it a problem for ourselves because we're going to like, something's wrong or like, why am I saying this to my, like, maybe I'm not ready. That's when we start really kind of kicking into high gear. And I think we really do know the difference between I really am, I'm not prepared and I'm like, I'm just kind of freaking out a little bit right now. Um, And then if you don't, like, I definitely encourage talking to somebody or a coach or somebody who can really like, yeah. But with the friend thing, going back to that, like literally just keep trying.
Yeah.
So it took me, when I moved to Colorado, I thought, oh, I'd be so good at this. And this is Colorado. Like everybody loves hiking. But like, I don't know, it was hard. I think it took me a good 6 or 8 months to really feel like I found my people. But I was very committed to finding them. Like, when I didn't, I'd be like, oh, well, I guess those weren't my people. Like, I'm just going to go out again and like go to this group thing. Or I signed up for, in the summer, I signed up for a women's mountain bike group that there's this Colorado Springs has one. I also like mountain biking.
Yeah.
And I would go to group rides and I would just like be awkward and be like, hi, I'm Allison. Like, what do you do? And sometimes we'd click and sometimes we didn't. And that's how I found people. And I'm sure you'll find them.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then the people who are intimidated, sometimes you just got to be like, girl, I love doing easy stuff. Like, that's so fine. Like, we'll do a chill hike today. You just got to, like, they're anxious because in their mind, they're thinking, they're judging themselves, right? Like, oh, I'm going to be so slow. She's going to wish she hadn't invited me. Like, they're thinking these things. So you just got to like talk to that part of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Now, somebody put hiking meetup groups, which is a great way to meet
people.
people.
Yes, totally. Yeah, like your state plus hiking. I know Colorado, I've never gone to one in Colorado Springs. I know they have one. But like a lot of cities, like especially if you're near hiking, but most places these days, I feel like hiking's blown up. I feel like there's probably a Facebook group in every state for hiking. And like I know 52 Challenges has like
we have 32 chapters. So
yeah, you have like the different communities as well that you do group hikes, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah. Anybody else?
Oh, I lost my chat. I find groups that can be odd, or groups can be odd and have their people who extend their capability. I have been in issues because of inexperience. Yeah.
Because I've had rocks pulled down on me and people wouldn't stop when they knew they got to their limits, or and just all kinds of weird situations. So I should be a little bit maybe more selective with the groups.
True. Yeah.
And just be accepting that maybe they're just not for me, and be accepting.
Yeah, exactly. Like not everyone's going to be the people that you want to keep hiking with. Also like, and Jackie, you sound like you have experience from what you were saying with backpacking. So it's like, sometimes when I'm in those scenarios, it's like also just coming from an educational, like mentoring kind of standpoint, because a lot of people, they are new, they're really like trying to learn these things too. And that can really open people up to, I mean, most of us were just feeling awkward and trying to make connections, and like, it feels hard as an adult. And yeah. Anyone else? Well, if there's no other questions, like I'm super easy to talk to. Hopefully I portrayed that today. You can always DM me or shoot us an email or anything. We have lots of stuff on our blog as well for backpackers, new backpackers, all the things. So thank you so much for being here live and having me.
Yes, thank you so much. We all learned a lot. So thank you. Thank you, everybody that tuned in.
Thank you guys. Have a great evening.
Bye. Have a good night.